There is a quiet contradiction at the center of how most people spend money. They spend to feel secure. They spend to feel in control. They spend to feel like they're finally getting ahead. And yet, the more they spend, the further that feeling seems to drift away. Not immediately, not obviously. At first, it feels like progress. You buy something you've been thinking about for weeks, maybe months. You justify it. You rationalize it. You even tell yourself it's a smart decision. It was on sale. I deserve this. This will improve my life. And for a brief moment, it does. There's a subtle shift in your state, a quiet sense of relief, a flicker of control. But that feeling never lasts, because what you bought was never the real transaction. And that's where the paradox begins. Most people think spending money is a financial decision. It isn't. It's a psychological signal. Every time you spend, you are not just exchanging money for something external. You are revealing something internal, a belief, a fear, an identity you are trying to hold on to or escape from. And here is the part no one says out loud. The moment you spend money to feel financially secure, you have already revealed that you are not in your bank account, in your psychology, because security is not something you buy. It's something you build. And anything that must be purchased to be felt will eventually need to be purchased again. That is the loop most people live in. They don't see it as a loop. They see it as life. Work, earn, spend, repeat. But underneath that pattern is something far more subtle, a cycle that reinforces itself. You feel a sense of lack, not always obvious. Sometimes it's quiet, a sense that you're behind, that you don't have enough, that something is missing. So you act, you spend, and in that moment, something shifts. The act of choosing, the act of acquiring, the act of moving forward, even artificially, creates the illusion of progress, and your brain rewards that illusion. Not because your life has improved, but because you've taken action, and action feels like control. But here's the part most people never stop to examine. What happens after the moment passes, after the package arrives, after the excitement fades, after the new becomes normal? You return, not to where you were financially, but to where you were psychologically. The same baseline, the same restlessness, the same quiet sense that something still isn't enough. And now, you need another action, another purchase, another moment of relief. This is the spending paradox. Spending is supposed to solve a problem, but in reality, it quietly reinforces the very mindset that created the problem in the first place. And the more intelligent you are, the more dangerous this becomes. Because you don't spend blindly, you justify, you analyze, you compare, you wait for the right moment. You convince yourself that your spending is different, more rational, more controlled, more intentional. But intelligence doesn't protect you from this loop. It makes the loop more sophisticated. You don't say, "I'm buying this to feel better." You say, "This is an investment. This is efficient. This will save me time." And sometimes, you're right, but often, you are simply giving a logical explanation to an emotional decision. And that is where the paradox deepens. Because now, you don't just spend, you defend your spending. You build a narrative around it, a story that allows you to feel in control, even when you're not. And over time, something subtle begins to happen. Your identity starts to attach itself to your spending patterns. You begin to see yourself through what you own, not in an obvious way, but in small, almost invisible ways. The way you justify a purchase, the way you compare yourself to others, the way you feel when you walk into a room, all of it is influenced by what you've accumulated. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many people are not trying to improve their lives. They are trying to upgrade their identity, and spending becomes the fastest way to do that. Not the most effective, not the most sustainable, just the fastest. You don't build discipline. You buy convenience. You don't build confidence. You buy signals. You don't build freedom. You buy the appearance of it. And for a while, that appearance is enough, until it isn't. Because reality has a way of catching up to illusions. The numbers eventually speak. The credit accumulates. The savings stall. The pressure builds. And now, the very thing you used to feel in control becomes the thing that takes control away from you. That's the final layer of the paradox. Spending begins as a way to feel powerful, but over time, it quietly becomes a source of dependence. You need it to feel okay. You need it to feel stable. You need it to feel like you're moving forward. And without it, you feel stuck. Not because you actually are, but because you've trained your mind to associate progress with consumption, and once that association is formed, it becomes incredibly difficult to break. Because now you are not just managing money, you are managing identity. You are managing emotion. You are managing the gap between who you are and who you believe you need to be. And spending sits right in the middle of that gap. Not as a solution, but as a bridge, a temporary one. One that feels stable while you're standing on it, but was never designed to carry you across. And this is why so many people remain trapped. Not because they don't earn enough, not because they don't understand money, but because they have never seen the mechanism clearly. They think they have a money problem. What they actually have is a pattern that rewards them for the very behavior that keeps them stuck. And until that pattern is exposed, nothing changes. You can budget better. You can earn more. You can optimize every number in your life. But if the underlying psychology remains the same, you will recreate the same outcome, just at a higher level. More income, more spending, more pressure, a more sophisticated version of the same trap. And the most dangerous part of all is that it doesn't feel like a trap. It feels normal. It feels justified. It feels like what everyone else is doing, which is exactly why it works. Because the most powerful loops in life are the ones that don't look like loops at all. They look like progress. And that is the illusion you have to break. Not by spending less, but by understanding what your spending is actually doing for you. Because once you see that clearly, the paradox, if you look closely, really closely, you'll notice something strange about the way desire works. It rarely peaks after you get what you want. It peaks just before, in the moment of anticipation, when something is still out of reach, but feels close enough to touch. That's where the intensity lives. The scroll, the comparison, the quiet calculation in your head. Should I? Do I need this? Would this change things? That moment is where your brain is most active. Not when you own something, but when you are about to, and that alone should tell you something important. You are not addicted to having things. You are addicted to becoming the person who has them. And your brain rewards that illusion long before reality catches up. Because the reward was never in the object. It was in the expectation, the imagined version of your life after the purchase, a version where things feel easier, cleaner, more in control, where you are slightly more organized, slightly more respected, slightly more complete. And your brain doesn't wait for that version to become real. It gives you a preview, a chemical signal that says, this matters, this will help, this is worth it. But here's what most people don't realize. That signal is not a guarantee. It's a guess, a prediction. And like most predictions, driven by emotion, it is often wrong. Because once the moment passes, once the purchase is made, the signal disappears. Not gradually, quickly, quietly, almost like it was never there. And what you're left with is reality. The object, the cost, the unchanged parts of your life that you thought would shift. And this is where the second layer of the paradox begins. The brain doesn't just reward anticipation, it also protects you from feeling the cost. Not entirely, but just enough to keep the loop going. Think about the last time you paid for something in cash. Not tapped, not swiped, not automatically deducted, but physically handed over money. There's a pause in that moment, a subtle resistance, a hesitation that feels almost irrational. You feel the transaction, not just financially, but physically, as if something is being taken from you. Because, in a very real way, it is time, effort, energy, all compressed into a number. and then released in a single moment. But when that process becomes invisible, when the transaction is reduced to a tap, a click, a confirmation screen, that resistance fades. Not completely, but enough. Enough to make spending feel frictionless. And when something becomes frictionless, it becomes habitual. You don't think about it the same way. You don't feel it the same way. You don't question it the same way. And over time, you begin to separate the act of spending from the reality of what you're giving up. That separation is subtle, but it changes everything, because now you are no longer trading something tangible for something else. You are making decisions in abstraction, numbers on a screen, balances that fluctuate, statements that arrive later, detached from the moment that created them. And when cause and effect are no longer felt together, behavior changes. Not because you are careless, but because your brain was never designed to operate in delayed consequences. It was designed for immediacy, for visible trade-offs, for clear signals, and modern spending removes those signals. It smooths the edges, it softens the impact. It allows you to act without fully experiencing the cost. And that's where the loop tightens, because now you have two forces working together. One pulling you forward, the anticipation of becoming someone slightly better, and one removing resistance, the absence of immediate consequence. Between those two forces, most decisions don't stand a chance, not because you lack discipline, but because the system is designed to feel effortless, and effortless behaviors are repeated behaviors. But there's another layer, one that is even quieter, even harder to detect, because it doesn't show up in the moment. It shows up over time. Adaptation, the ability of the human mind to normalize anything, no matter how exciting it once was, no matter how meaningful it seemed. What feels like an upgrade today becomes the baseline tomorrow, the new standard, the new normal. And once something becomes normal, it no longer produces the same emotional return. It no longer feels like progress. It just feels expected, which means the only way to feel that shift again is to move further, spend more, upgrade again, chase the next version, not because you are greedy, but because your baseline has moved and you didn't even notice when it happened. That's the part that traps people the longest, not the big decisions, not the obvious mistakes, but the quiet normalization of everything they once wanted until nothing feels like enough. And at that point, spending is no longer about improvement. It's about maintenance, maintaining a feeling, maintaining a standard, maintaining an identity that now requires constant input. And this is where the paradox becomes a system, a self-sustaining cycle that doesn't need your attention, only your participation. You anticipate, you act, you adapt, and then you repeat, each time believing the next decision will be different, more intentional, more aligned, more final. But the structure doesn't change, because the structure was never built on logic. It was built on emotion, refined by convenience, and reinforced by time. And once you see that clearly, something shifts, not immediately in your behavior, but in your awareness. You begin to notice the moment before the moment, the space where the decision hasn't been made yet, but the pull is already there. The quiet tension between wanting and acting. And in that space, for the first time, you have a choice, not about what to buy, but about whether the feeling driving that decision is something you actually want to follow. Because once you understand how the loop works, you realize something uncomfortable. Most of your spending was never about the thing itself. It was about a feeling your brain learned to chase. And if you don't question that feeling, you will follow it. Again, and again, and again. Just more intelligently each time. Once you begin to see the loop, you start to realize something even more uncomfortable. You were never just spending money. You were responding to something deeper, something quieter, something you didn't fully question, because it always felt justified. And that's what makes these traps so effective. They don't feel like mistakes. They feel like decisions. Reasonable ones, logical ones, even necessary ones. But underneath each of them, there is a pattern. A pattern that doesn't just influence how you spend, but why you spend in the first place. And most people don't fall into one of these traps. They move between all three, depending on the moment, The situation, the version of themselves they're trying to become. The first trap is the one almost no one admits to. You don't spend to buy something. You spend to become someone else. Not permanently, not consciously, but just enough to feel different for a moment. You see it in small things. The clothes that don't match your current lifestyle, but match the version of you you're trying to step into. The tools you buy before you've built the habit. The identity you purchase before you've earned it through behavior. And in that moment, it works. You feel closer to being more disciplined, more successful, more in control. But that closeness is fragile because it wasn't built, it was simulated, and simulations don't last. So what happens next is predictable. You don't become the person. You become dependent on the feeling of becoming the person. And the only way to recreate that feeling is to spend again. A different item, a slightly better version, a new attempt at the same identity. And slowly, you begin to confuse progress with acquisition, as if owning the tools is the same as using them, as if buying the symbol is the same as becoming the substance. That's the first trap, and it's powerful because it feels like ambition. But it isn't. It's substitution. The second trap is quieter, more emotional. You don't spend to become someone else. You spend to escape who you are right now, not in a dramatic way, in a subtle one. A long day, a stressful moment, a sense that something isn't working. And instead of sitting with that discomfort, you interrupt it. You open something, you scroll, you browse, not looking for anything specific, just looking for relief. And eventually, something appears, something that feels like a break, a small reward, a shift in state, and you take it, not because you need it, but because you need to feel different. And in that moment, you do. The tension drops, the pressure softens, the day feels slightly more manageable, but nothing actually changed. The situation is still there. The problem is still unresolved. The version of your life you were trying to escape is still waiting for you. But now there's something new added to it. A cost, a subtle accumulation of decisions, made not from clarity, but from avoidance. And over time, those decisions add up, not just financially, but psychologically, because now you've trained yourself to respond to discomfort with consumption. And once that pattern is set, every difficult moment becomes a trigger. Stress becomes spending, boredom becomes spending, uncertainty becomes spending. And the more life throws at you, the more you reinforce the habit, not because you're weak, but because it works temporarily, and temporary relief is often more addictive than long-term solutions. That's the second trap, and it's dangerous because it feels like self-care, but it isn't. It's avoidance with a price tag. The third trap is the one that hides the deepest because it doesn't feel emotional at all. It feels rational. You don't spend to become someone. You don't spend to escape something. You spend because it feels like control. When things are uncertain, when the future feels unclear, when you're not entirely sure where you stand, spending gives you something immediate. A decision, a result, a sense that you've acted, and action feels like progress. Even when it isn't, you organize your space. You upgrade your setup. You optimize something small, just to feel like you've moved forward. And in isolation, none of these are bad decisions, but taken together, they reveal something deeper. A need to create control in areas where control is unclear. And instead of addressing the uncertainty directly, you manage it indirectly, through purchases, through adjustments, through constant small decisions that create the illusion of stability. But control built on spending is fragile because it requires continuous input. You have to keep adjusting, keep upgrading, keep maintaining the system you've created. And over time, what once felt like control becomes dependence. You don't feel stable without it. You don't feel organized without it. You don't feel like things are on track unless you are actively doing something, buying something, fixing something, improving something. And that constant need to act is what keeps the loop alive, because now you are no longer reacting to desire. You are reacting to uncertainty, and uncertainty never fully disappears, which means the behavior never stops. That's the third trap. And it's the hardest one to see because it looks like responsibility, but it isn't. It's compensation. And when you step back, when you look at all three together, a pattern begins to emerge. You spend to become. You spend to escape. You spend to control. Three different reasons, but the same outcome, a cycle that keeps you moving without ever really moving forward. And the most dangerous part is this. None of these feel like mistakes. They feel like life. They feel normal. They feel justified, which is exactly why they persist. Because you don't question what feels normal. You repeat it. And the longer you repeat it, the more it becomes part of who you are. Until one day, you're not just someone who spends money this way. You're someone who believes this is the only way to feel okay. And that belief is what keeps the entire system in place. Not your income, not your expenses, not your financial knowledge, your belief. And once that belief is exposed, once you can see it clearly, something begins to shift. Because now the question is no longer, how do I spend less? It becomes, which part of me is driving this decision? And that question, at some point, you stop asking how to spend less, because that question never really worked. You've tried it before, budgeting, tracking, cutting things out, and for a while, it feels like progress, until it doesn't, because discipline alone can't solve a pattern it doesn't understand. And what you're dealing with is not a spending problem. It's a loop built on anticipation, reinforced by emotion, and maintained by identity. And loops don't break through force, they break through awareness. Not the kind of awareness that tells you what to do, but the kind that shows you what's actually happening in the moment before you act. Because that moment is where everything changes, not after the purchase, not when the consequences arrive, but right before, when the desire is present, but the decision hasn't been made yet. Most people never sit in that moment. They move through it too quickly, from impulse to action, without ever noticing the space in between. But that space is where your leverage is. That's where the loop can be interrupted, not by resisting the desire, but by understanding it, because once you understand what the desire is doing, you stop treating it as a command and start seeing it as a signal that something inside you is asking for attention, not a product. Attention. And that distinction changes everything, because now you're no longer asking, should I buy this? You're asking, what is this trying to solve? And most of the time, the answer has nothing to do with the thing itself. It's about how you feel, restless, uncertain, behind, out of control. And when you can name that feeling, you create distance from it. Not enough to eliminate it, but enough to not be driven by it automatically. That's the first shift, not control. Clarity. The second shift is quieter, but more powerful over time. You begin to redefine what progress actually looks like. Because for most people, progress has been tied to visible change. Something new, something improved, something added. But real progress, especially in money, is often invisible. It's the decision you didn't make, the purchase you didn't justify, the moment you paused and let the feeling pass without acting on it. No one sees that. There's no reward, no recognition, no immediate feedback. But that's where stability is built, quietly, without announcement, without validation, and over time, those invisible decisions compound. Not just in your bank account, but in your identity. You stop being someone who reacts and start becoming someone who chooses. And that shift is more valuable than any increase in income, because it changes how you handle everything that comes next. The third shift is where most people resist, because it feels uncomfortable. You stop using spending as a way to regulate your state. Not completely, but intentionally, you allow discomfort to exist without immediately trying to solve it. You let boredom be boring. You let stress be present. You let uncertainty sit without reaching for something to change how it feels. And, at first, that feels like a step backward, because you've removed a tool you've relied on for years. A quick way to shift your state, a reliable way to feel different. But what you gain in exchange is something far more stable. You learn that you don't need to act to feel okay. And that realization breaks one of the strongest links in the loop, because now spending is no longer your default response. It becomes a choice again. And when something becomes a choice, it slows down, it becomes deliberate, it becomes clear. And clarity is what the loop was designed to avoid, because a clear mind doesn't chase the same way. It evaluates, it questions, it waits. And waiting is something the loop cannot survive. Because the longer you wait, the weaker the impulse becomes, the feeling fades, the urgency disappears, the illusion dissolves, and what's left is the truth, whether something actually matters or whether it just felt like it did. This is why a simple pause can be more powerful than any strategy, not because time changes the decision, but because time reveals the intention behind it. And once you see that intention clearly, you can decide if it's something you want to follow or something you want to outgrow. And that's the final shift. You stop trying to fix your spending and start evolving your relationship with it. You no longer ask, "How do I control my money?" You ask, "Why did I ever feel the need to use money to control how I feel?" Because when that question becomes real to you, the entire structure begins to loosen. You stop chasing small emotional returns and start building long-term stability. You stop reacting to every internal shift and start observing it. And in that space, something rare begins to form, a kind of quiet confidence, not based on what you own, not based on what you can afford, but based on what no longer controls you. And that's what most people are actually searching for. Not more money, more control over themselves. Because once you have that, money becomes simpler, decisions become clearer, and the need to constantly prove something through what you buy begins to disappear. And in its place, something much more powerful emerges: freedom, not the kind that comes from having more, but the kind that comes from needing less to feel complete. So the next time you feel that pull, that quiet urge to buy something, don't rush past it, don't suppress it, don't justify it. Just pause and ask yourself one question, not what it will give you, but what it's trying to fix. Because once you see that clearly, you don't need to fight the loop anymore. You've already stepped outside of it. And from that place, for the first time, your money stops controlling your behavior and starts reflecting your awareness.